Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Teacher Data Use Survey, Webinar 4. This is the final webinar in our series, Communicating Results. My name is Jennifer Watring, and I'm a partner with REL Appalachia, and I'll be your host for today's webinar event. If at any time, please feel free to reach out using the chat feature if you have any problems or technical issues. If at any time you'd like to ask a question of one of our speakers, you can do so through the Q&A panel located at the right-hand side. We will most likely hold all questions until the end, but please feel free to enter them as you think of them. We'll also be conducting a poll later on in our introduction, so please watch for that to come up on the right-hand side under your polling. So without further ado, I'd like to take a minute to introduce Stephanie Wilkerson, who's the president of Magnolia Consulting, who will be starting our webinar today. Stephanie?
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. I hope it's a beautiful Friday afternoon wherever you may be. It certainly is here in Charlottesville, Virginia. You're joining us for Webinar 4 on the Teacher Data Use Survey with focus on communicating results today. As Jennifer said, my name is Stephanie Wilkerson. I'm president of Magnolia Consulting, and I'm also a member of the REL Appalachia team. I had the honor 3 years ago of meeting Margie Johnson, who is a co-presenter with us today. She's the Business Intelligence Coordinator in Metro Nashville Public Schools. And we met in partnership through REL Appalachia to help create a culture of data use through collaborative inquiry in Metro Nashville. And when we first started that work, it was very apparent that people in the district were using data as part of a continuous improvement process, but we had no evidence of that. There was no data of teacher data use practices. And it was that need that really planted the seed to find a survey that would measure teacher data use. But we really couldn't find one out in the field that would help us until we met Jeff Wayman, who is our co-presenter and co-author on the Teacher Data Use Survey. He's president of Wayman Services, and Jeff said, hey, I have a survey. It needs to be refined. It'd be great if we could pull together a group and bring this to the field. And that's what we did. We were also joined by Vincent Cho at Boston College, Ellen Mandanock with WestEd, and John Sapovitz with the University of Pennsylvania in creating the Teacher Data Use Survey that we're going to talk about today. So I've mentioned Regional Appalachia. It's one of 10 RELs across the country. We serve West Virginia, Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. We do this through providing research, evaluation, and technical assistance in areas based on needs of the region. So with Metro Nashville, we've been working on data use. And really the purpose is to help provide practitioners and policymakers with evidence-based information to inform decision-making. The Teacher Data Use Survey has been out only a month, so if you would like, please tweet about the TDUS and this event and share with any other social media outlets that you have so you can increase the awareness and availability of the TDUS. All right. As I mentioned, this is Webinar 4. We've had 3 prior webinars focusing on general overview of the survey, how to customize it, how to administer it, and today we're focusing on communicating results. It's okay if you weren't able to make one of our prior 3 webinars. Jeff is going to recap some of the key points from each of those today. Also, you will receive an email with links to the archive recordings of each of the 4 webinars, so you can revisit as many times as you like, as also you can share with your colleagues. We'd like to take a minute to get to know you on the call. So in the bottom right-hand portion of your screen, you'll see some poll questions. There are 3, or actually 4 in there, so you might have to scroll. The first question is, what is your role? The second question, let us know if you've administered the survey. We know that might be a little ambitious since it hasn't been out that long, but we would like to know if you have. Do you work with anyone who's administered the survey? So you might be supporting an organization that has administered it. And let us know if you had the opportunity to participate in any of the previous 3 webinars, or if you did not participate in any of them. Again, it's not a requirement whatsoever. I'll also add here, if I don't mention it at the end, while we're waiting for the results to come up, If you have not administered the survey but you are going to, then please feel free to let us know, connect with us. Jeff and I are here to support you along the way. We want to hear that you've had the opportunity to use it. I think just a couple, here we go, with our results. So it looks like we have a couple district level administrators, an instructional coach. Welcome. We're so excited to see folks from schools and districts joining us because this survey is certainly developed with you in mind and with your input. And we have folks falling from other categories. Don't have folks, anyone who's administered this survey or anyone who's working with organizations who have administered it. And we do see some people who've participated in past webinars. Thank you for coming back and joining us, and we have some that are new today. So two of our main goals is just to help build your understanding of the importance and the benefits of communicating results from the Teacher Data Use Survey, and also to that end want to help increase your awareness and understanding of a reporting template that we created that we think will enable the effective communication of results. So as I mentioned, Jeff is going to go over some key points from our prior 3 webinars. He's going to talk about benefits and why it's important to communicate results. And then Margie and I are going to be talking about the report template that's available for you to use. And Margie is going to talk about how Metro Nashville used both the template and the dashboard report to do a data-driven conversation. If you haven't accessed the survey or any of the support materials, there's the link here, and a link will be put in the chat box that you can click on. You'll find the 3 versions of the TDUS survey as well as the guide. You'll also find the TDUS report template that we'll be talking about today. And then you'll also see a sample dashboard report, which we will also reference. Keep in mind, when you open up that report template, it will not have any data or information in it. You have to use it to be able to generate those dashboard reports, and that's what we're going to talk about a little later on today. With no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff so he can begin with a review of our past webinars.
Stephanie, thank you. Jennifer, am I muted? I'm showing that I'm muted here.
We hear you.
We can hear you.
Great. Then I would classify hearing me as further ado. But anyway, so I'm Jeff Wayman. As Stephanie said, I led the research team that developed the Teacher Data Use Survey. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is what we did in webinars 1, 2, and 3. These webinars are going to be archived. 1, 2, and 3 are. So will this one. They'll be recorded and available. They're not up yet. I guess they'll be up soon. Check back often to see, but at some point you'll be able to access any of the webinars. So you can either go back and hear stuff you might have missed on a particular webinar, or you can hear a webinar if you missed the entire thing. One of the things, I've been researching data use for the last 15 years almost, and one of the things that I've written a lot is that data use lives and dies in the principal's office. One of the reasons why that's true is the principals are responsible for including teachers in using data. You can't have an effective school-wide or district-wide data use initiative unless you get your teachers on board. And that falls on the principal. But here's a funny thing that we have done as a field is, for the last 15 years, we've been saying teachers use data, be evidence-based. Yet, in a goofy way, almost all of the evidence that we have about how teachers use data is anecdotal. So while a principal may be asking his or her teachers to use data and become more evidence-based in their own practice, the principal's knowledge about how teachers use data, what they may think of data, which ones they find more useful, what things they have trouble with, that knowledge is almost always anecdotal. Therefore, we need a survey like the Teacher Data Use to help principals and superintendents and other leaders learn more and know more about their own teachers and how they're using data. We created 3 versions of the Teacher Data Use Survey. As you might guess, there's a teacher version, but there's also an administrator version and one for instructional support staff, people like data coaches and folks like that. All 3 versions ask exactly the same questions. They're just worded differently. So for the teacher, we might ask, are the following forms of data available to you? If you're an administrator, you get the question that says, are the following forms of data available to your teachers? And if you're an instructional coach or someone like that, it'll talk about the teachers that you support. All 3 versions are asking about teacher data use, but by giving these different versions, you get different perceptions, and you're able to triangulate data about what's going on with your teachers and data use throughout your school or district. In webinar 1, we also talked about the conceptual framework. So when all 5 of us got together in a room here in Austin, Texas, where we started was we said, okay, how do we think teacher data use works? And if we got an idea of how it worked, the components that we thought were important, then we could measure those components. And that framework that we operated on is listed or is shown on your screen here. We conceived of teacher data use as being a set of actions that teachers take with data. And those actions, we thought, would inform their knowledge and practice. And if your knowledge and practice gets better, then student learning should improve. But here's where the field has failed, in my opinion, that too often in schools and districts across the U.S., it has stopped at the actions component. That is, we've said, here teachers, use data, and then we went away and let the teachers take these actions. In fact, my research and the research of everybody in the field shows that these actions are supported and affected by different things. And these are the things you see on the side. You know, your attitudes towards data affect actions, and your actions affect your attitude towards data. Collaboration, organizational supports like leadership and computer data systems, how good you are at using data. So the Teacher Data Use Survey measures actions and the things to the left of it because those are the things that have to do with data use. So we have scales that correspond to these things. It doesn't measure knowledge and practice, nor does it measure student learning. You know, there are other ways to measure that. That's beyond the scope of data use itself. But what you'll see in the Teacher Data Use Survey is measurement of the things that go on the left. In webinar 2, we talked about customizing the Teacher Data Use Survey. To my knowledge, this is the first customizable survey, and it's because the other surveys that I'm familiar with, my work included, have talked about data generally. So when we asked a teacher about practice and how data affected that, we would say, how do data affect how you do this? You know, we might say, how often do you talk to a student about data? Well, one of the things that we decided when we got into this room is that answer is different depending on which data you're talking about. If you ask a teacher how often they talk to another teacher about state test results, that's going to be different than if you ask them how often they talk about their own tests and quizzes, and so on. So it really matters what form of data you're talking about. So what you need to do with the TDUS is you need to identify specific data forms that you're talking about. And so in webinar 2, we described how these are made up of 4 buckets here, 4 categories of data. You want to ask about state data, and examples of that are typically state test results. You want to ask about periodic data. Those are like benchmark assessments, things that are given at regular intervals to let us know how students are doing. Local data are things that are written locally either by the school or maybe by a team or by the district. And then personal data is the one that's actually used most by teachers because that's their tests and their quizzes and their grades and things like that. Webinar 3 dealt with administering the Teacher Data Use Survey. And so we identified 5 steps for administering this. You know, once you decided if you were going to go with online surveys or paper and pencil, then you need to do these 5 steps. You need to identify survey recipients. You need to determine like what the window is for your survey. You need to promote the survey and administer the survey, of course, make sure that you get a high response rate too. So those are the 5 steps that we talked about in detail in Webinar 3. If you want to know more about those, you can read the manual or hear Webinar 3 whenever it comes out. Today, we're going to be talking about communicating results, because it's one thing to give this survey and get the results from it, but it's important to communicate these results well to make your school and district a better learning organization. So why is that important? Well, if you get the results of this and you try to communicate it internally, then you're letting your teachers, your principals, your educators know that you're serious about improvement. You let them know, as the 3rd bullet says, if you're telling them what was found, you're letting them know that you're listening, that you're valuing their opinions. And that's super important, because if you've been in education very long, you've experienced a time when somebody said, hey, what do you think about this? And then nobody ever got back to you. So their opinions are important. Kind of a side story of that. I've been in education over, 30 years or something. I had a PhD in education. Nobody ever asked me questions about education. I'm sure you experience the same thing. People tell me things about education, and so educators are used to having their voice not heard. That's why it's important to communicate these results. It gives us an opportunity and a platform to talk about our improvement efforts, because you have to connect these to improvement. And so it's an opportunity to say, this is what we're about as a school or district. Finally, it takes the anecdotal part out of this. When we're talking about anecdotal information, we're often talking about you and me, and it gets real personal. This provides us evidence, and so we can talk about improvement in terms of evidence whenever we have this survey. What do you realize from this? What good does it do you? Well, number one thing is it supports, it promotes, and it demonstrates a culture of transparency. School organizations are often very opaque in terms of their information, both internally and externally. We're seeing this play out with the privacy debates. I mean, for decades, schools have collected data like these, and just all of a sudden, parents are like, wait, what are you doing with this? Oh, we've had this forever. We just never told anybody what we were doing with it, and it's coming back to hurt us a little bit. Trouble is, that happens internally also with your own educators, and so this supports a culture of transparency. Schools and districts often need to improve in the way they communicate what's going on with them, and so this is a way for them to tell their own story. There is evaluation going on every day about teachers and what they do and how their practice goes. And this is happening at the barbecue. It's happening at the bus stop. It's happening in the teacher's lounge. And often schools and districts don't have any control over this story. The truth is that if you don't tell your story, somebody else will. And this gives you a good base to start telling your own story, an evidence-based platform to talk about your story and to talk about it in terms of improvement. So it helps you get past these rumors and anecdotal evidence. One of the great things about this is, since you're not relying on anecdotal evidence, you're getting opinions from everybody, not just the people I know as a district person or as a principal. And so you find these variations. And these are important variations because there are a lot of variables, a lot of variability about the way people do their practice and about the way they think. And those are very positive things for education. So what do you need to remember about communicating results? How do you go through this? We did some work with a district one time where we gave this survey and did some other things to kind of audit how they were using data. And so we gave them the results, and there was something that none of us thought about. We all looked at the results, and they looked around and they said, oh my gosh, we don't have any way or any plan to disseminate this. And it kind of set us back a little bit because we needed to come up with a plan. So you want to come up with a concrete plan for disseminating this, for communicating about it. Figure out who your audience is and tailor your communication to the audience. Sometimes you're going to communicate this externally to parents or policymakers even. Sometimes it will only be internally. And you're going to talk differently to each one of these groups, and so you want to make sure that you tailor that communication to the audience. As you communicate, you want to make sure that you keep these messages positive, okay? While teachers are often my easiest sell about data use because teachers just want to know more about their kids, they are rightfully the most skeptical about data. And it's not because they don't believe in data, it's because every time the word data has been said, it has not been good for them. And so data is a real threatening thing often to teachers. You can do something about this. You can talk about the results of this survey in terms of improvement. You can talk about it in ways that aren't about you and me, what you're doing wrong or what I'm doing wrong. You can talk about how we are going to improve. You can talk about it in positive ways, in ways that say what's going to go on from here forward. You can talk about this in ways that aren't threatening to people. One big way to do that is to tie your results to your improvement plans. You should have an improvement plan. Well, almost everybody is required to have one. Tie these results in. One of the mistakes that I see that are being made is that lots of times data use is divorced from the improvement plan. So processes for using data is divorced. And the schools that I've seen that are really, really doing this well are the ones that have written it into their improvement plans. So write this survey into your improvement plan and tie the results to that. Remember that change is slow, particularly when you're talking about culture, and particularly when you're talking about an education culture. So when you give this survey in the spring, you know, let's not expect everybody in the fall to be turning cartwheels over data. Let them know that this was their voice. You need to remember that you were listening to their voice. Let them know that, and be patient about the way your culture change is going to go on. I said last week that one of my graduate students said one time when we were talking to a district that wanted to administer this, she said, yeah, that, you know, you're really whacking a hornet's nest. You ask people what they think about data, you got to expect them to come out buzzing. That's a good thing. But remember that. It's their voice you're listening to. And if you remember that, then you can't help but create feedback loops. And those feedback loops have to be ongoing. This survey isn't a one-time thing. Well, it may be, but you know, we recommend giving it multiple times. But it's part of what hopefully is an ongoing organizational set of feedback where you're hearing from your educators what they think, and they're hearing from you what's going to happen. And if both of these inform each other, then you have a healthy learning organization. So without further ado, if we consider what I just did ado, then Stephanie is going to talk about the TDUS reporting template, and you're going to get to see some very, very cool things. So it's all you, Steph. I just tried to drag the ball over to you, and I failed. So, Jen, if you can.
All right, I got it now. All right. Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate all the considerations that you're sharing with us about communicating results, because you know, when we created the TDUS, we really thought about how this information would be used, because to me, you know, a survey is only as good as is the usefulness of the findings it generates, right? So we can have a great survey, but if nobody's using the findings, then it's really not informing the type of change and improvement that we would hope. And I like how Jeff talked about being able to tell your story, and I think that, you know, we created this report template as a way for researchers and practitioners to help tell the story about teacher data use in a school or district. And it also serves as a mechanism for dissemination. It makes it very portable. So, you know, one of the things when we created the report template is that we wanted to keep it user-friendly and simple. And so it's an Excel database, and it allows users to enter data from the 3 survey versions and generate 2 types of reports. So the first report is a 4-page, highly visual, what we call a dashboard report. And the second is a longer narrative report in Word that provides a bit more description about the survey itself and the items. So the graphic displays that you see in both of these reports are customizable, and they're based on the data forms you included in your survey. So Jeff gave some examples of what the data forms are, and that's what you decide on when you customize your survey prior to administration. Another feature of the report template is that you can disaggregate the results by school. So the dashboard report can represent your entire population, or you can create school-level dashboard reports. So the format, first you must know that it's only available for a PC version right now. Office for Mac isn't playing well with us, and until it does, we will only offer the PC version. We will get a Mac version as soon as we possibly can. And it's important, I think, to keep in mind that the design of the report template assumes that users have limited experience with working with data, also with entering data and with reporting data. So we are thinking of practitioners who might not have any experience with data analysis whatsoever. So when you open up and look at the database, it might seem kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of information in there, but what it does is it just gives you a very detailed step-by-step set of instructions and even a glossary of terms to walk you through being able to enter the data that is necessary for the template to generate the two reports. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a little snapshot of an information sheet that we have in the database. And when you input information into this sheet, subsequent sheets like the data entry sheets for the survey versions and the dashboard report are set up specifically for the survey versions that you administered, the number of forms of data that you included on your survey. You'll see that there on question number 3, and the names of those data forms. So question 4, you'll see you actually enter the name of the data form as you used it on your survey. What is also on this page but you don't see here is an opportunity to list the schools by name that you administered the survey to. Keep in mind that that would be an additional item that you add to the survey. The TDUS as it stands right now does not have any items on demographics. So you would need to add a school level question in your survey, and then you would have the opportunity to enter the school name or a pseudonym for that school if you want to do a little bit to protect anonymity in this sheet here. That's what you would need to do to be able to generate your school level report. Now, there are a few ways to enter data. I want to reiterate that in building this report template, we wanted it to be appropriate for use for a practitioner who would be administering the survey in paper form, as well as, say, it's on the other end of the continuum, a researcher who's using sophisticated online survey software. That's a very broad continuum of people using the survey. So you'll see in its simplest form that we have drop-down menus to select the response option as you enter the data. Part of our reason for having drop-down menus instead of just entering a reporting value is to eliminate the chance of creating a data entry error. This is one of our biggest things that we were paying attention to in creating a template and putting it out there in the field. We wanted to reduce the chance of making any errors in data entry, because then those show up in the reports, right? So we tried to control it as much as possible here. We understand that if you're a researcher and you're used to entering data, that having a drop-down menu with these response options might seem very painstaking. And with that in mind, we are going to be creating another version of this database where you can actually enter the reporting values. We don't expect practitioners to know how to code a survey or even know what reporting values are. So in this case, the reporting value of 1 would equal a response of strongly disagree, 2 would equal disagree, and so on. So we will have that version that might make it easier for those entering data. There's also the opportunity to copy and paste from an Excel spreadsheet. This would be the case where you use an online survey software program. You export results from the 3 different survey versions into the respective Excel spreadsheets and copy and paste it into this template. This makes us a little bit nervous just because the response options exported from your survey software need to be the exact same as what is coming into the report template. So for instance, your response options would need to be strongly disagree, disagree, agree, and strongly agree for it to match up with the report template. So in doing this, if you're used to using Excel, that's certainly an option. You know how to check for any errors, alignment of columns, and all of that stuff. That saves you a little bit more time. But one of the things that we still think is the advantage, even though you might spend a little bit more time getting the data in there, you're spending no time in creating graphic displays or a reporting format for that information. If you're going straight from your survey software program, you have 3 different databases, you're merging those, you've got to create the graphic displays and then put it into a report format. That takes a lot of time. So we really think that the time that you spend getting the data into the database, you actually save much more because these reports will self-populate. All right, so I am going to show you the sample dashboard report right here is what you're looking at. And you'll see the same graphic displays are used in both the dashboard and the Word reports. There's limited text intentionally in the dashboard report because we're focusing more on your graphic displays. But the text in both the Word and the dashboard, it does not change based on the data. This is very important to note. So although the results and subsequent graphic displays, they're unique to each school or district, the text remains the same. And it just describes the survey items and the scales in general. So you'll see along top here this kind of gray banner working left from right based on what you entered in the information sheet as well as your data entry sheets. It'll show the versions that were administered. It'll show the number of respondents per respondent group, and it'll list the specific forms of data that you included on your survey. So believe it or not, all survey items are represented in this report. You'll see here our components, actions with data, competence in data, attitudes towards data, and you'll see the scales also underneath each one. So it's 4 pages total. The only exception on the dashboard report, what's not included are any of the open-ended items, such as items that ask respondents who selected other as a response option to provide further explanation. And we have one question at the end that's, what else would you like to share with us about data use? So while it doesn't show up in this report, there is another tab in our report template that is on all the text information. And so you just click a button and it'll generate all the text responses into a tabular format that then is included in the appendices of the Word report itself. So within a chart, what you'll see is that the results are presented by respondent groups. So you'll see them for teachers, administrators, and instructional support staff. And you can you could generate as many dashboard reports as you like using the drop-down menu. If you look over on your left-hand side, you see a little snapshot of the drop-down menu that would be on this green bar that says quizzes. If you click on the drop-down menu, it creates that drop-down list of all the data forms that you entered in the information sheet, and you can select then which data form you would like to present the results for. So if you included 8 different data forms in your survey, to include like these rows for 8 data forms would take much more than 4 pages. So we limited it to 4 different data forms. But you can generate as many reports as you'd like if you want to, if you have more than 4 that you've included on your survey. You can also generate, as I had indicated, a dashboard report for a single school. So in the Word version, again, the graphic displays are the same, but the Word report also includes an introduction to the survey and a description of the survey's conceptual framework that Jeff mentioned, the components, and the scales of the survey. It also includes a cool table at the end and then conclusion section that rank orders the survey scales by highest to lowest means that were rated by teachers, administrators, and the instructional support staff. If you joined us last week for the, Jeff mentioned and showed a table that was an example of this that we include in the conclusion. Again, keep in mind text is still generic. It does not speak to specific survey findings, although once you click on a button in the dashboard report, it generates this Word report into Word, obviously. It's fully editable. So anyone can go in and expand on their results or adjust the formatting once it is generated and in Word. You cannot generate a Word report for a single school. So I'm going to hand it over to Margie now, who is going to share with you her experience in Metro Nashville of administering the TDUS survey and using the dashboard report.
Thank you, Stephanie. So as Stephanie said, we met back in, I think, 2013 as part of the REL Appalachia partnership because in my role as Business Intelligence Coordinator, I was hired to build capacity to use data for making informed decisions. And my first task was to actually do some research. My background is primarily professional development, but I needed to shore up my research and data use, and I actually gave Jeff Wayman a call back in, I think, August of 2012, because I reached out to him and Ellen Mandenack because they were researchers in the field and, again, to shore up my knowledge of data use. And just looking at the research, saw the word collaborative inquiry coming up over and over. And that's our partnership with REL Appalachia, to build the capacity of our educators to use a collaborative inquiry process for building their data use capacities. So before I talk more about the TDUS dashboard report and how we used it, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about Metro Nashville Public Schools. We are the 42nd largest school district, serving about 88,000 students. And one thing I always like to include when I talk about our district is our diversity. Sometimes people don't realize how diverse of a city that we are here in Nashville, with even some of our schools have over 100 languages spoken within the school. And so we worked with Jeff and Stephanie to validate the TDUS. They did cognitive interviews, I think, back in October of 2014 with some of our schools. And then once it got into a version that we felt we could give to schools, we decided to start small to go big. So in the spring of 2016, we developed a collaborative inquiry community of practice with 5 of our middle schools, and we primarily targeted, or this project primarily targeted middle schools because, again, when we looked at our data, going back to what Jeff said, trying to model effective data use, it was middle schools that we felt needed. We had put quite a bit of support in our high schools in building their capacity to use data, and so we felt like when we looked at our data, the middle schools needed support in using data for making instructional decisions. So we had 5 middle schools who their principal leadership graciously volunteered to, I call it, go down this journey with us, and that's Haynes Middle, Margaret Allen Middle, Two Rivers Middle, West End Middle, and Wright Middle. So in February of 2016, we actually administered the survey to their teachers, their instructional support staff, and then the administrators. Administrators also took the survey. And you will see on this slide a snapshot of our page 1 of the dashboard. And really that's through our partnership is how the dashboard came about, because we chose to give the online survey. Well, when we got the results back, we had about 12 pages of data per survey, and when I was showing the reports to the principals of the schools, we were flipping pages trying to compare, okay, well, what did the teachers say about this question? What did the instructional support say about this question? And what did we say? And so we were trying to triangulate the data, but it was really hard in the format, you know, that came out of our survey tool. And with this dashboard, we were able to consolidate the survey and then create a really nice report that does triangulate the data for us and makes it much easier to process the data and to have conversations around the data. And so we used this report, and at the time, we were only able to get a consolidated report. That was actually an improvement that's been made since we used the TDUS dashboard report. We weren't able to do a by school report, but we were able to do the entire community of practice. So the way that we communicated these results and used them is, again, modeling that collaborative inquiry process. In the first year, in 2014 of our project, we brought together stakeholders to talk about collaborative inquiry and say, okay, what are our barriers to implementing collaborative inquiry? And one of those barriers was lack of a common language. We also had lack of trust, and then we had lack of leadership modeling. So we've spent some time developing a common language, and this logo that you see with the activating, engaging, exploring, discovering, organizing, and integrating, this is the collaborative inquiry process that we're now using in the schools that I'm working with when we're looking at data. So it's shifting kind of the data conversation. Many times what I've observed with data meetings is, you know, the data expert tends to come in with a report and they tell people kind of the data that are on the report. Here's what the report says, here's what it means, here's what we're going to do. The collaborative inquiry approach really starts with a question, and you'll see our question was, what is the role of central office staff in supporting collaborative inquiry? And at this meeting, I had representatives from the 5 schools that were part of the community of practice, along with central office staff, so that, again, it was the we working together on how can we support the schools in improving their data use. And for once, we actually had data to support the conversation. Again, like Jeff had said earlier, there were anecdotes, there were rumors, but we really didn't have data. So back to that third barrier, we really needed to model effective data use. We needed to model collaborative inquiry. And that's what that meeting was. We used the dashboard, which was really nice. Now, I did bring the raw data. It was, like I said, about 50 pages in all when you had the reports from all 3 surveys, and I had it available for people. Again, I think going back to that point of being transparent, and I told them that they could access it at any time if they wanted, but we were going to primarily use this dashboard. And even with the dashboard, they were really impressed with it, just because it was, you know, it's nice and visual. And then the other key point was that it triangulated the data. So we did an activating and engaging activity. Then we explored and discovered, and you'll see on the screen the observations that they made from the dashboard, because that's another piece to the way that we're doing data use, is trying to not look at the data and explain it, but to stick with just the facts. And then we organized and integrated the data observations. We used a protocol called traffic light, and we talked about things that we were going to stop doing, things that we were going to continue doing, and then things that we were going to start doing. And it was really nice to have real data informing the practices that we plan to put in place. From that meeting, we have committed to following up, so we are actually in the process of administering the TDUS again with those 5 schools and then I've had 4 more schools join our community of practice. And I can't wait for that data to get back so that we can have another conversation about how we can continue supporting schools and building their capacity. And also just to note, we have decided to give it this fall, and then we're going to re-administer it in the spring. While we gave it in the spring, being a large urban district, some of our schools, lost 10, 20 people on their staff just for various reasons. So we felt like it was important that we administer it again this fall, and then we'll administer it again in the spring. And the other thing to note is that we also worked with Stephanie to develop an evaluation plan for collaborative inquiry, and of course the TDUS is one of the data points that's used as part of our evaluation plan and to help us monitor our progress for implementing collaborative inquiry throughout the district. So just some lessons learned and considerations. Again, the TDUS provides data about data use. Before we had rumors that, oh, this school was really a good, strong data use, or, yeah, my teachers use data, they use it all the time. Well, that was not always the case. I think that was one of the things, one of the ahas that came out when you can see the triangulated data is, the administrators and the instructional coaches sometimes thought teachers were using data more than the teachers even self-reported, or vice versa. So it was really nice to have a conversation using actual data. Again, it supports the culture of transparency and continuous improvement. I think the more transparent you can be, the more people can learn together. Jeff alluded to the fact that many times when teachers heard the word data, it was, I call it data was used as a hammer sometimes to, unfortunately beat people up with, but this is really about let's all come to the table, we're all in this together, and how can we work together to improve, collaborate to improve. Again, the dashboard report was critical for triangulation. When it was in its raw format from this online survey tool, it was really difficult for us to look at. I mean, we were like, okay, which question are you on? Question 11. Okay, let's look at all these 3 reports, flipping through the pages. Okay, what did the administrator say? What did the teacher say? This dashboard just really makes it much easier to read and have conversations about how we can improve. And then finally, again, I challenge everyone to use a collaborative process, whether you call it collaborative inquiry or whatever your data use process might be, but using a process where you're bringing together diverse stakeholders where they are taking ownership in developing their recommendations and next steps. Again, it's not, I didn't use the dashboard report to report to them, okay, here's what the data say and here's what you need to do to improve data use in your school. It was, we were looking at the data together. And many times, I'll be real honest, I don't preview the data before I give it to them because I don't want to go in with a bias. I want their fresh eyes and their fresh observations to guide the recommendations and the next steps. So without further ado, I guess, we're coming toward the end. I'll turn it over to Jennifer for our audience question and answer.
Okay, thank you, Margie, and thank you as well, Jeff and Stephanie. Some of the questions that we have so far is, one of the questions is there a way to see the data by item and by survey version?
I'll take that. In the dashboard report, you don't see the data by item. It's aggregated to the scale level. But what we do have in the report template itself is 2 appendices that are generated. And one I mentioned earlier with the text appendix. So any of the open-ended questions are summarized in tabular format there. And the other is a data appendix. And so what you'll find there is actually item by item, the percentage or mean for every item for each of the 3 versions. And these are in tabular formats as well that when you create the Word report are exported as an appendix to the Word report. So you can, for those like Margie is saying who want to dig deeper into the details, it is there as an appendix to the Word report. And so you still can kind of get the side-by-side teacher to administrator to instructional support staff if you want to get into the details.
Okay, thank you. The next question, can I still use the dashboard report if my district only administers 2 of the 3 survey versions?
Yeah, I think yes, the answer is yes. You can use it for 1 version, 2 versions, or 3 versions, and that's the beauty of the report template is when you are entering information into the information sheet that I showed earlier, that first question is, did you use the teacher survey version? Did you, yes or no, the administrator version, the instructional support staff version? You indicate right there if you used it or not. And what that's doing is then automatically generating a data entry sheet for the versions that you use. So if you didn't use, say, the instructional support staff version, you're not going to receive a data entry sheet, and you won't be entering any data. There will be no columns for that, and it will not show up on the dashboard report or the Word report.
Okay. Next question. Because this is something new, and as you said, the survey just came out, the question is, I've never done a survey like this before, and you make it sound, somewhat easy to do, and I hope for this person's sake it is that easy, but if they have any issues or trouble, I know you provide your contact information at the end, but are you able to provide assistance for them?
Yes, absolutely. I think that feel free, and depending on what part, I think Jeff and I are available to support anyone administering the survey all the way from, I think, the beginning of deciding how am I going to customize it, which data form should I consider, do I want to include demographic data, to, we can help support if it's nuts and bolts of actual administration about survey software or anything like that. Magnolia Consulting can also support in the administration of surveys if you are working in an environment where you don't have access to software and using print version doesn't seem to be appropriate or feasible, all the way through to how am I using this report template? Am I using it correctly? To what do I do with the results now that I have them? So Jeff and I are both available to support users every step of the way, as much or as little support as you would like. So definitely reach out to us.
Yeah, and I'll note that, although I'm a consultant, I've spent most of my life in universities doing research. And so although I'm a consultant now, and, I would love to be hired to help you with this, I would also love to not be hired. So what I'm saying is don't feel like if you want to reach out and ask a question that because I'm a consultant you got to pay for it. I love having conversations about this. And so pick up the phone, shoot me an email, call on Twitter, however you want to handle it. Steph and I will help you out.
Yeah, and I would say too, I think in so like for the report template, if you use a report template and you see a way to improve it or you see a glitch, please reach out to us. We want to be in dialogue as you're using these tools, as you're putting it up, the survey up online. If you want to send us a link and we can test it out, we'd be happy to do that for free because we are learning about how the survey is being used, how the reporting template is being used as it's in practice. So that's some of the benefit that we get back. As Jeff was saying, like we're dedicated to this work and we support it, whether we're paid for it or not. I think being able to support use in that way would be, we're very open to that. And yes, the survey is free for use. It is It is a publicly available document through the U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Education Research. So all 3 versions are free. The supporting guide is free. The report template is free as well.
Okay. Any other questions that any of our participants may have?
This is Margie. I just wanted to add that I put in the chat box the link to reading more about the dashboard report. And as Stephanie and Jeff said, I'm also available with emails. I work, obviously for a district, but one of the ways that I build my capacity is through, networks outside the organization. And then the other thing I wanted to add is that, Stephanie is telling the truth when she says that she'll listen to your feedback and make changes, because just along the way, like I said, there's several changes that have been made in the final version just from us using it this spring. So I appreciate that and working with her. So feel free to reach out to either of them.
Okay, one more question that just came in. Any report about the validity of the survey?
Yeah, we piloted this survey in Metro Nashville, and I think that report is not available because I think IES doesn't release those. But I can tell you, we addressed this on another webinar too. I can tell you that the scale reliabilities all came back above 0.8. They're in the 0.8, 0.9 range. We also did what we call cognitive labs, so we interviewed teachers while they were taking the surveys, and we made changes based on that. And so I can tell you from our work in Metro Nashville that the survey makes sense to teachers. It measures what we think it's measuring, and the items hold together well. That said, I would love to do a much bigger study on this in multiple contexts, more teachers, different geographic regions. So if anybody has that on their mind, let me know. We could, the field could use that, and I would like to be involved in it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And our person that asked the question said thank you very much. So those are all of the questions that we have for now. I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball back to Stephanie to close out our event for today.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Well, last we closed with a survey. So we want data from you about your experiences and any feedback that you have about the webinar today. Any aspect of it would be important for us to know. When you close out of WebEx, you'll have a pop-up window with a link to that survey. So we really appreciate you taking the time to provide it. And thank you for joining us today. As you can tell, Jeff and I are excited to move this survey out into the field. We are available. Our contact information is here. So you have multiple ways of reaching out to us. We'd love to hear your stories if you are adventurous enough to use the survey and try the report template. We're open to your feedback along the way. So be in touch and look for the emails that will have links to the archive recordings of the 4 webinars. So we thank you very much for joining us and hope you have found this to be a helpful review of the Teacher Data Use Survey.